declining in proficiency level, this was also not very pointed. So this is just an improvement of the other two versions, right? And it is an improved version of these two, right? So this is a fine, very good problem definition where you can start with. The entire case study actually talks about the declining educational outcomes, right? So you have quantified the decline of Meghalaya's SDG 4, which is related to education score from 0.55 to 48, right? That's fine, right? There's a consensus, right? So that's a final problem definition, right? Just underline this so that, yeah, so that you don't get confused with these two. Yeah. That's your final problem definition. Okay, now tell me, when you were doing research for this problem definition, what basic data sources you referred to? One was this case study, one was this data point. Other, Kenneth, you were referring to few documents. Can you just share with us what documents, what PDF you were working on? Yes, yes, that was one report, which is a fine piece of evidence. Sure. And this was published by Ministry of Education, right? Which year? 21-22. That's a fine piece of evidence, and it has state-wise scores, right? And what is the score of Meghalaya? So in 2019 it was 55, right? In 2020 it declined to 48. Right? And in 2021-22, what was the rank? You said second last, right? Sure. So in 2021-22, it declined further, right? That's what your this data is telling you, right? Fair enough. Sure, Kenneth. So now what? So I mean, just also be sort of aware of the processes that you are taking to for each of these steps, because the process by which you are finding some of these things are also important. Even though if you're not able to find the exact data point or exact problem definition, that's secondary outcome. My sort of main objective is to help you first be aware of of all 8 steps, what these 8 steps are, and also the process behind all these steps, right? So we have completed step number 1. We have defined the problem, and we have assembled some evidence, right? We have taken help of case study, we have taken help of a report by Ministry of Education, and we are convinced that the Meghalaya SDG 4 scores and overall educational rankings have declined over the past few years. That is our problem, right? And all of us are convinced. Now we move to the third step, which is constructing alternatives. Now we have defined the problem. Now we will sort of find a possible solution to solve the problem. Now in the beginning, if you recall, I said that there can't be only one solution to solve the problem. There could be several solutions, and each of those solutions have the potential to solve the problem. So we will in this step, we are going to explore all these 4, 5 possible options that can help Meghalaya improve its SDG score in next 2 to 3 years, right? So the step number 3 is constructing alternatives. And what do I mean by alternatives? Alternatives are nothing but policy options or alternate courses of action or alternative strategies of intervention to solve the problem. So if you redefine, constructing alternatives are these alternatives: policy option 1, policy option 2, policy option 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth. All these 5, 6 options should have the capability to solve your problem definition, right? This is step number 3. And how we are going to sort of construct the alternatives. So first of all, the point number 2 on my PPT says that the alternative should be mutually exclusive. So this should be a completely different option. This should be completely different option. This should be completely different option, right? And let's say if you are saying that you should have 5, and 5 is a very good number. So this should be different and it should be able to solve the problem independently. This should be different and it should be able to solve the problem independently. Similarly for this and for this and for this. Later on, we will see that we can club some of these options, but right now, let's focus on having 5 completely different strategies to solve the problem. Now, I'll give you an example, and it is there in the case study, right? In the case study on page number 2, if you look at um, in the table, if you look at the third last entry is on the basic infrastructure, right? On the electricity, drinking water. So this can be your policy option number 2. I'll tell you why it is not policy option number 1. Okay, so this can be your policy option number 2. Look at the second last entry point, percentage of trained trainers at secondary level. It is 43.62, which is way below national average. This could be your policy option number 3. Right? Similarly, there could be policy option number 4, which may or may not be in this case study, which you need to find out doing your research. Maybe, as I said, it could be direct cash transfers, right? So that could be a policy option number 4, and similarly, there will be a policy option number 5. So this is what you need to do. Now, what is policy option number 1, and why I didn't say that one of these options could be policy option? Policy option number 1 should ideally be your status quo. What is status quo? It is the state level schemes, policies or programs that are actually trying to address this problem. So Meghalaya will have some specific dedicated schemes and programs to address this problem, right? So that should be your status quo. That either you sort of go in the same trajectory as it is this a business as usual, and maybe sometime in future it will solve the problem, which you believe, which you think, you realize that it's not going to happen, right? You need to have some sort of a radical solution. Why we always keep policy option number 1 as status quo? Because these are mostly pet policy solutions of, let's say, someone from the political side, right? So, and because you'll be presenting it to them, so you need to sort of accommodate their pet solutions in the policy sort of options, right? You can't say that, hey, whatever you were doing was completely wrong, I am suggesting something new. So you suggest what is already there, which is status quo. What you can do is you can club policy option 1 and other options to solve the problem. So status quo, let's say there is an ongoing program for increasing, let's say, grand enrollment rate, right? You club it with infrastructure, and that could be your solution. You club it with teacher training, and that could be your solution, right? So what you are doing is you are accommodating, which is accommodating things that are already happening without reinventing the wheel, and you are clubbing it with a very unique solution to solve the problem. Something that is not being sort of either researched or being looked at. Something these things are being overlooked, right? So that is why this first one is status quo. The other options are completely unique options that can solve the problem. Is this clear? Right? So if you see that each one of them must have the ability to solve the majority of problem. One or more policy action in conjunction might solve the problem at later stage, right? That's what I'm saying. In conjunction with others. So P1, P2, P1, P3, P2, P3. Some sort of this conjunction and interconnection can solve the problem. That is fine. That is completely fine. I'll just skip this because this will take some time. That is going to be your next set of activity, right? Intuitively, you have some ideas that what could be your policy solutions, right? You have done some research, some things are there in case studies. Now, your activity for next 30 minutes is help us identify 5 different policy options that can solve your problem definition, right? So that is your activity number 2. Is this clear? Uh, can one of you write your problem definition somewhere here? Just write the problem definition using this marker so that we remain focused. Declining of Meghalaya's SDG 4 score from 55 in 2019 to 48 in 2020. Yes. So now your home, I mean your activity is find 4. I am just find 4 policy options that can solve the problem. Okay. Just few tips before you start your activity. So ideas for initial list of alternatives. So just as I said, that policy number 1 should be status quo. So find out pet ideas that are already trying to solve the problem, right? Maybe there is something missing which can be filled by policy option 2, 3, 4, 5, and it can be a very good policy solution. So first option should be your pet ideas or the status quo solutions, policy solution. Look out for analogies, while you are doing research and you see that some other state is doing something completely different. That can be your policy option 2, 3, or 4, right? So just look for analogies, something which other states are doing completely uniquely and completely differently. Maybe state like, let's say, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, Kerala, whose education outcomes are one of the finest. You can look at their scores, just see what they are doing, right? Maybe they are doing something completely different and innovative that we can imbibe. Keep budgets and targets in mind, right? So when you're saying that this is my policy option, that I'm going to, let's say, increase the budget by so and so percentage, if that is your policy option, be mindful of the budget limits also, right? There is a handout which we have given to you. It might take some time, but it's called Appendix B. It says things that government do, right? You'll see there are 8 or 9 points. So point number 1 is taxes, point number 2 is regulation, 3 subsidies, up till point number 10, financing and contracting. So basically these are nothing but measures that government generally tend to take when they are designing a policy. So you can get some ideas from this list as well. Point number 1 to point number 10. Not all will be applicable in this case, but some of them will be applicable in this case. So this is just a guide that can help you come up with policy options. And when you are writing the policy option, just put in simple sentences. That option number 1 is so and such and thing. Option number 2 is so and so. Right? So it's 2:45. Shall we complete this by 3:15? It will be a bit quick, but let's try and finish by 3:15.
We have only seen like up to the secondary level, but post-secondary level, mostly they most of the students they migrate to the cities.
Very less higher secondary
Okay.
schools in
To
rural
for higher
areas.
Yes.
secondaries.
Sure.
And higher secondary is very less in rural areas. So we thought of improving the enrollment ratio in
Hmm.
higher secondary level. Uh, and for that to enroll, we have to
Increase.
improve the basic infrastructure.
Sure. So this you have to qualify. So you have just mentioned the reason, irregular payment of salaries. What you are going to do? Are you going to irregular? So this is you are increasing the infrastructure, teachers training. This which is fine. This you are improving basic infrastructure. This is also solution. This to me is a factor. It's not a solution. You have to rephrase it so that it becomes a solution.
Should be regular release of some.
Exactly. So you have to rephrase it.
Release, no?
Regular amount. They should be regular.
Huh?
Solution is the regular release of, not irregular.
Oh, you are going to aggravate the problem.
Our movement
Schools will shut
irregular,
down.
then more protests will be.
Yeah. So this is good. This policy options are good, decent.
problem है. No, we are mentioning means okay.
So first one is status quo, right? But what is status quo?
This already an education.
There's already a policy, the state education policy,
We'll maintain, we'll keep go on with that.
And
proper
how?
implementation of
Sure. So how does the current policy solving this problem?
like at present, no, the current policy is like implementation. We lack the implementation, so we need to implement it properly in a proper
Sure. So the implementation is the problem in the current sort of policy. Okay. Basic infrastructure improvement. Anything specific in basic infrastructure? How do you define basic infrastructure?
Like we define basic infrastructure is like lack of teachers. Like we don't have proper qualified teachers, and also and on top of that, we see like most government school, like they don't even have proper benches, so it's difficult for the student to attend classes and all.
Sure.
Electricity connection, drinking water, all those
Yes,
are the
yes.
problems that the rural areas are
Absolutely.
Even
facing.
internet connectivity also in the school.
Sure. So train teachers training, regular release of payment of salaries, and improvement of enrollment ratio in higher secondary level in rural areas. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? Okay, sure, fair enough. Let's move to our next step then. So let me see what our progress is. So we have finished this, we have finished this, we have finished this. Now we move to the fourth step, which is selecting the criteria. Right now, what this means, and with this step, we enter into the evaluative section of the policy simulation of the Bardach eightfold path. Right now, here we can suspend our analytical sort of frame of mind, and we have to take some assumptions. We have to take some subjective sort of we have to do some subjective evaluation. So we have to select the criteria to evaluate our policy alternatives. So let's say you have these 5 alternatives, right? And one is status quo, then infrastructure, teacher training, regular payment, and so on and so forth, right? Now, for each of these policy alternatives, you have to evaluate it using a lens, and those lens will be 3 or 4 different kinds of lens through which you will evaluate all these 5 policy options, right? And these lens will using this lens, you have to see that what would be the overall outcomes of each of these policy outcomes. Now, let me break it into a very simple simple way. One of the policy criteria which I assume you will sort of, you will agree is efficiency, right? Now, efficiency means that your problem statement is declining of Meghalaya's SDG score from 55 point to 48 point, right? So efficiency is that how efficiently you are able to increase it from 48 to, let's say, something like better in 2022, 23, 23, 24, right? You have a very limited sort of budget that is being sanctioned to you as a department. So within that limited budget, how efficiently you are able to fulfill this goal, right? Which means that you need to quantify some of these aspects. So meaning that you will increase the grand enrollment ratio by so and so percentage, right? So that so and so percentage, that's your efficiency. So there are 4 or 5 such criteria. One is efficiency, the other one is equality and equity, right? Then you have timeliness, another one is legality, and the fourth one is administrative robustness. So efficiency, as I said, that, and when what you are going to do in this exercise, you have to use another flip chart, another sheet, and you have to construct a matrix like this, right? And on your column, it should be your policy alternatives. So policy alternative 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. On the rows, there will be these evaluative criteria. So first one is efficiency, which means that the wider audience it is, that becomes a part of your sort of policy intervention, the better it is, right? So that becomes your efficiency part. Equity is that are you able to increase the learning outcomes, or you are able to reduce the sort of dropouts. As you have mentioned that in higher secondary there are massive dropouts. So that becomes part of equity. So which means that if you use equity lens, does policy option number 1 reduces your dropouts more than other policy options? Does policy number 2 reduces your dropout? So the lesser the number of dropout for each of the policy option, the better it will be in the equity sort of parameter. Same with timeliness, which means that if you are able to implement your policy solution, is it within a given time frame or not, or is it going to have some sort of spillovers, right? Which you are not able to control, because one of the biggest problem in large government policies and government schemes are that timeliness becomes a massive challenge. Fourth one is legality. Legality means whether whatever policy options you are suggesting, do they come under the larger sort of ambit of government, Meghalaya state government laws, statutory regulations, and other rules, right? Because they should ideally lie within the sort of legal infrastructure. And final is the administrative robustness, which means the feasibility of the project. Whether you have adequate manpower, skill, subject matter expertise to implement all these options, right? So let me sort of help you how you will fill this matrix. So you will create this matrix. As I said, in the column you have policy option, or on the sort of rows you will have your criteria, right? So for example, for efficiency, in efficiency, again, you have to do some guesstimate, and you have to do some little bit of research that policy option 1 is your status quo, right? Whatever Meghalaya government is implementing right now, in terms of efficiency, how many students will be covered, that number you need to find out. How many students this thing will cover, that's your efficiency. Equity means learning outcomes, how, because declining of Meghalaya's SDG, right? So, which means that learning outcomes depend on this, right? If you increase the learning outcome, you will increase the rank, right? So, equity means that are learning outcomes increasing or decreasing? in policy number 1. Just focus on policy number 1, which is your status quo. Timeliness. There will be some sort of literature which will tell you that this policy is sort of will be implemented up till, let's say, 2025 or 26. You have to find out whether whatever it has achieved till date, will it be able to achieve the result by 2025 or 26, or it is going to overshoot. That will become part of your timeliness. Legality, of course, it is a part of legal structure, that is why you are implementing it, so that becomes part of legality. Administrative robustness, is this administratively feasible or not, right? So while you are constructing this matrix, there will be few criteria for which you will find some number. So for efficiency, let's say when I said that number of students covered, you will find a number. For few things you won't find a number. Maybe equity, you will find a number, some statistic that it is going to increase the learning outcome or reduce the dropouts by so and so percentage, right? So that will become part of your equity. Timeliness, legality, and administrative robustness, these are some slightly subjective. So if you think that it comes that your policy option 1 comes with is getting over within the stipulated time, you give a plus sign, right? If not, then you give a negative sign. Same with legality. If it is under a legal sort of framework of state government laws, you give a positive sign, else you give a negative sign. Same with administrative robustness. Whether it is feasible administratively, you give a plus sign. If not, you give a negative sign. Right? Similarly, you do the same exercise for policy option 2. Policy option 2 is your
Basic
infrastructure, right? So infrastructure. For infrastructure, you have to see that policy option number 1, whether it is efficient. So number of schools, right? Then equity. I mean, how much it is sort of covering. So the coverage of the schools, right? Whether it is covering all the schools or not. Then with timeliness plus or negative sign. For legality plus or negative sign, and for administrative robustness plus or negative sign. Similarly for policy option 3, policy option 4, and policy option 5. Just a simple matrix like this. Any question, any doubt? So basically, when you are giving these things, you have to think about the outcomes, not the alternative. What would be the outcome if you go for policy option 1, right? So if you are saying that efficiency, right, that the number of beneficiaries that is being covered. So number of beneficiaries covered, you have to put the number here. So you have to think about the outcomes that you might get, right? Again, this is a slight guesstimate, but that's the guesstimate that you have to do. Similarly, for policy option 2, you are saying infrastructure. So how many students, what is the how many beneficiaries are you going to cover? That will become. So the efficiency, in our case, it is going to be number of beneficiaries covered. Equity, in our case, will be increase or learning outcomes. Timeliness is straightforward. Legality is straightforward. Administrative robustness is straightforward, right? Any doubts in this? See, this is one of the this is the example, right? So this example is from a problem definition which was trying to solve the unemployment problem, right? So criteria number 1 is efficiency, the number of jobs created per million rupees spent by the government. In your case, it will be number of students going to school per million rupees spent by the government. Okay, so just draw the analogy. Criteria number 2 is equity, relative changes in income across all sections of targeted beneficiaries. In your case, it will be increase in learning outcomes, right? Timeliness will be time taken to bring down unemployment level. it's quite straightforward, right? Administrative capacity, lowest transaction cost and least amount of leakages. You just have to put plus or minus, whether it will lead to more leakages and more administrative cost, or less leakages or less administrative cost. So this is an example. So okay, let's break this activity into two parts, right? Into two parts. I said that let's have 5 criteria: efficiency, equity, timeliness, legality, and administrative robustness. Do you agree with these 5 criteria? Or there should be something else? Agree? Right? Okay. So in next 15 minutes, let's break into this activity into two parts. At times it can become overwhelming. First, define efficiency, equity, timeliness, legality, and administrative robustness. In case of this, in case of a problem definition. So for a problem definition, what will be efficiency? Just define it. Efficiency is nothing but the number of students enrolled in the school per million rupees spent by the government. That's efficiency, right? You're spending 1,000 rupees, and how that 1,000 rupees is being spent is your efficiency quotient, right? Equity will be relative changes in the learning outcomes across all sections in a targeted way. So this is how, just first in 15 minutes, define these 5 criteria for us. And then we will go to scoring part. We will move to there, but let's do step by step. Is equity in your case, and what is timeliness, legality, and administrative robustness? Just define for me. No, 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 not yes and no. You have to define what is efficiency, number of students, what is efficiency. Take example of from there, right? So their efficiency means the number of jobs created per million rupees spent by them. What is efficiency? Efficiency is, right, how many, it's just doing cost benefit analysis, right? That's what efficiency is. So how many students got enrolled or as part of the schooling system per million rupees spent? That's your efficiency. That is how you have to define all these 5 criteria. Don't go into policy options right now. So your efficiency will be the number of students enrolled in schools or primary schools per million rupees spent by the government. Sorry.
Contoh status quo kita kan loh.
Yes, that's a part B of the same step. Right. So first you need to define, because without definition you won't be able to do your proper research, right? If you don't know that I'm looking for number of students enrolled in school, then how will you do the research? So that is why you first need to identify, you need to define.
Di tanggung ke school tak pernah dulu. Wah. Tang di school ni apa ni?
Definitely, idan day have ID
Numbers, wah di numbers tu.
numbers there. Barak district dan aja pak aja sapu ar
Private ID deh.
private kan tu private aided government 3,550.
Kau itu los berapa ada? Lah kacang itu tak alang kan?
Yang kini dah kajong private aided kat tu government kat tu all district.
Oh, private itu aja.
Masalah plus lah try.
Sama ini ha total ni kau. Oh, ambil lah plus.
Plus lang ya.
Lima one ane government private ada.
All district.
Memang lah kacang.
Dah kajong ya.
Ah,
Total kami hari aja.
Drew WA
We are
6612. Sama tu. Sama bila cina table main. Tatok saraf tu. Cina. Cuma number tu deh. Kuniti dapat drop out ni. Student.
drop out student. Amat.
6612 you like scrolls ano
Numbers.
M6612 hindi M tang hundred betul.
This is
Again, 5 more minutes. We'll take 5 more minutes and then we'll break for tea. And probably when we come back, we can finish this. Don't, Kenneth, don't go into quantifying it. Just define it first.
Number one, efficiency.
Katu berdok me, katu berdok mengkong me. Kata P1. Tak cu ni lagi. Inlak tu. Inlak tu dapat.
First we have to define, no, sir?
First, you have to define,
Define first.
because without definition, how you are quantifying it's quite completely unknown, right?
Let us define number 2. Relative changes.
Relative changes in educational outcomes. Changes in increase in educational outcomes across all section of targeted beneficiaries.
Student enroll in labs.
Educational outcomes, right?
Number of students enroll in labs. Katu education income next. Next education income. P1 number 2 no?
time taken to finish this, time taken to meet the outcomes for each of the policy outcomes or options, sorry. So timeliness, definition of timeliness in your case will be time taken to increase SDG ranking of Meghalaya. Right? Sorry.
For today, shall we put some limit?
Actually, not. Because you can't predict, right? It will actually depend on. Don't do it right now because um, this will be complete speculative work, right? And you don't know that which of the policy options which. So that's why it just keep it. We'll keep it open ended. We are just increasing the ranks. We're just improving the score, right? In For administrative capacity, in your case, it will be. Administrative feasibility or something, right? Lowest transaction cost and administrative feasibility. It could be human resource also, right? You understand what transaction cost mean, right? Transaction cost means the amount, the financial cost and the other cost that will take to fulfill one of these policy options, right? So the amount of resources, human resources, all financial resources, that all that will become part of the transaction cost, and it should have least amount of leakages, right? So that the maximum financial and resources can be deployed to meet to sort of implement your policy option. Actually, if you keep lowest transaction cost and least amount of leakages, that's good enough definition for your administrative capacity. Done. We will share the soft copy of the slides with you. Legality will be, do these policy options come within the legal framework? You have to check, you have to do just some basic research, because at the end of the day you just have to put plus, or if yes then plus, if not then negative. It won't be negative most of the time. It can't be because then something is really flawed. Yeah, absolutely. That's what someone will challenge you in the court. Someone will challenge your whole policy in the court. Your policy is gone. Let's break for a tea. Okay, so till now we have managed to define our criteria, right? So we have defined a criteria. We know what 5 criteria are, right? Can you just read out the 5 definitions of all 5 criteria for all of us?
education income,
Sure.
then the timeline can taken to increase this SDG line dynasty, neglect,
Hmm.
inequality will be positive, then this additive will be
Robustness. Hmm. Sure. Just repeat the first criteria.
number of students enrolled in class.
Okay. A better definition would be number of students enrolled per lakh money spent on education, because you are restricting your definition. Number of students enrolled in lakh,
Only in lakh.
right? So you're restricting it. So better definition would be number of students enrolled per 10 lakh rupees spent. So you know for every 10 lakh how many students are getting enrolled, and is that number getting bettered year after year or not? Are we spending too much or are we spending too low? Right? Can you read out your second option?
The education income.
Outcome.
Education outcomes.
Educational outcome. Which means that whether a 8th standard student can read 5 standard textbook or not, can do a 5 standard mathematical problems or not. So that's educational outcomes, right? And the first one you would have rectified it. It is the number of students enrolled per 10 lakh rupees. That. Okay. Now just spend another 5 minutes, and I'll trust you I'm going to wrap up in the next 5 to 10 minutes. In a fresh page, just create a matrix and use a horizontal sort of page. Don't use vertically, use it horizontally. So in column, put option number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And in column, the definitions of your 5 criteria. That's it. You just need to create this chart. So option number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Create this thing table, and then your definition of criteria number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's it. This is useful because tomorrow we are going to use this matrix, right? So, can I use this table? And you can come, all of you can come here. You can bring a marker. So what you're seeing is that these 5 are your parameters, right? This is parameter 1, this is parameter 2, criteria 3, 4, and 5, right? Now I said that you want to create a matrix. So these are the rows, right? So just consider these as rows. This is your policy option 1, which is status quo, right? Policy option 2, which is your infrastructure. Policy option 3, which is your teachers' training. Then policy option 4, and then policy option 5, right? Finally, this. Now, this is your criteria matrix, right? What we have done is that we have identified these criteria on which we will evaluate the outcomes of these policy options, and these are the policy options. So this is evaluative. This is your criteria matrix. Also, if you remember that I said that step 4 onwards, we are entering into the evaluative, in which you will take some subjective sort of decisions, right? So this is a criteria matrix. Now, final question of the day: as a group, between efficiency, equity, timeliness, legality, and administrative robustness, as a group, which one of the criteria you think is of the utmost importance for education? Efficiency, efficiency, right? So this is your dominant criteria, which means that this is your utmost priority. That your policy option or your policy should be efficient. It's not that you are disregarding these things, but these are secondary. This is a primary and priority sort of criteria. So tomorrow when we come back and when we do step number 5, which means when we will project the outcomes, we will make sure that, so for example, the outcome, what would be the projected outcome of policy option number 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. This is how we will start filling the matrix. Again, little bit of research will be done and little bit of assumptions and sort of guesstimate you will do. Similarly, for within equity, educational outcome, so you have to put how many students will sort of what kind of educational outcome increase will happen from policy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Time taken 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 2 years, right? Legality plus, 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 plus. Administrative robustness plus, maybe minus, plus, maybe minus, minus. Right? This is how you will fill. And then step number 6, you will take a decision as to which policy option gives you the best projected outcome. That will be the policy option. Right? So we will leave this here because tomorrow when we come back, we will work on this matrix only, right? We will use these two charts and we will start sort of filling these two sets, all these sets, right? So you understood, right? Till now what we have done, till now we have identified a problem. We have assembled some evidence to back our problem. We have constructed alternatives and we have criteria to evaluate these alternatives, right? Tomorrow, we will project the outcomes and then we will take a such judgment at which one of these will give the maximum bang for the buck, which means maximum impact. That will be a policy option. So you see how, in a very systematic way, you are scientific as well as a little bit of evaluative way, you are actually approaching a policy problem, right? And how you are sort of coming to a solution, coming closer to a solution. So this is how it is, the systematic process works. I hope till now it's clear. It takes time, so don't worry if even if it is not clear, even if you are able to capture 30% of what is being covered, it's clear. I will share my phone number, I will share my email ID. You can trouble me as many times as possible, right? And I'll be happy to sort of revert back. So tomorrow when we come, we'll do the project outcomes. All right, I think we can take a break. Thanks all for joining. This was really awesome. Thank you.